Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sauradeep Sarkar, your host for today's webinar. It gives me immense pleasure welcoming you all to the live webinar on the theme of Demand More from your data centers. This webinar is hosted by Cyber Media Research in association with HPE. For the duration of presentation, all participants' line will be in a listen-only mode. After the presentation, we will be having a question and answer session. And please, your feedback is very important to us, so please submit your feedback at the end of the webinar. Now, I would like to hand over the floor to Mr. Apula Ghosh, who's Lead Consultant, Emerging Technologies Research, Cyber Media, who will share 6 trends that are shaping the enterprise data centers. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thanks, Shoradeep. Thanks for the warm welcome. And a very warm welcome to all people listening in and joining in for today's webinar. So as you're aware, this has been made possible by our principal sponsor, HPE, right? And today I'm going to talk about, quickly take you through, as a research entity, how we have seen the data center space shaping up. I've been tracking this space for a while now, and we saw how data centers have also emerged both from a technology standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint. How new technologies like cloud computing, virtualization, green data centers have really changed the way we work around data centers, right? So that's what I'm going to talk about, right? So essentially, if you see across data centers, there are few things which we typically tend to see as drivers, right? So one of the, if you can see in the slide number 2 that I'm just showing to you, there are 6 key drivers which are driving the way IT has a reflection of the business that you operate on. One of them being, the rise of digital content. Second being broadband penetration. Then you have seen big data and analytics on the rise. You've got social media, smartphones, and smart cities. So in a way, what we are witnessing is the surge of data. We are witnessing a surge of data in an explosion that like never before. That's why we see a lot of digital content being created. And how was that possible? That's, I guess, to a very large extent, in a way, all of this is correlated and co-connected in such a way that broadband, for instance, the IT penetration increased, the broadband penetration increased, which is why we rose to a lot of data in a structured, unstructured format in the way of social media and other apps. Smartphones was critical in the way we interpret, relate to our day-to-day lives, right? And big data analytics was a virtue of all this coming through, right? And the last but not the least is smart cities, because that's a function where a lot is being talked about. And when you need to have a setup like a smart city, you need to have a very solid infrastructure background where the data center plays a very critical role, right? So going forward, so there's a small technical snag. Just hold on for a second, please. Right. So as I said, I would be taking you through the 6 major trends that we see which are impacting the data center, right? So the trend number 1 is hyperscaling, So as you're aware, the data centers in India today are hosting a whole lot of IT infrastructure for various type of industries. I'll just take one example here, for instance, the e-commerce business, So to handle the massive surge of, say, for instance, online traffic and to reduce the network outages, we are now incorporating hyperscaling, right? So migrating the infrastructure onto cloud, allows business to keep the networks free from bandwidth crunches, which allows smoother customer experience online while streaming videos and all forms of static information. So because gone are the days when you have static modes of information coming in, going out. So the name of the game is to be on the top of the game where you need to be relevant, and relevance only happens when you can do things quickly. So hyperscaling actually helps you do that. Right. Moving on to the most critical aspect of it all, security. As you're aware, regardless of which technology area that we speak about, security happens to be the cornerstone, no matter whether we're talking about data center or cloud computing or virtualization. That happens to be still the cornerstone, right? So while data breaches continue to garner the majority of security-related headlines, security has become a data center availability issue as well. You know, so as more and more devices get connected to enable simpler management and eventual automation, threat vectors are also on the rise. So how do we manage that? So data center professionals are adding security to their growing list of priorities and beginning to seek solutions that help them identify vulnerabilities and improve response to attacks. So management gateways that consolidate data from multiple devices to support the DCIM are emerging as a potential solution. So with such modifications, they can identify unsecured ports across the critical infrastructure and provide early warning of denial of service attacks. So as I speak, security is of paramount importance. It was an important cog 5 years back. It remains a very important piece till today. And probably there is nothing like a foolproof solution against security attacks, but one needs to be on the top of the game to make sure that we are secured in spite of all the technology foundations that we have. Going forward, trend number 3, hybrid internal clouds. We know the basic tenets of the public cloud, the private cloud, and the hybrid cloud. So let's understand what is exactly the hybrid internal cloud, right? So, from what I've seen while talking to a lot of CIOs, a couple of them probably being part of today's audience as well. So a lot of these prominent organizations are also shifting, their focus towards hosting hybrid internal clouds to assimilate their ever-increasing network traffic into their functioning. So hybrid cloud infrastructures involve, connecting two separate clouds. One is obviously your internal, and the other one your external cloud, allowing seamless transfer of data and applications using identity-based user access controls. So such cloud infrastructures help mitigate any input-output latency dependencies for storage. In addition, these internal clouds help augment IT capabilities and provide robust fault tolerance. Why this becomes critical is because you would want to take the advantages of both the worlds. While private cloud or your captive data center gives you the safety, your public cloud environment gives you the flexibility. How would it be, if we could capture all of those nuances into one single environment? And I guess which is why today's topic becomes very, very relevant from an HPE standpoint, because that is exactly what they will be talking about in the next session, right? Coming to trend number 4, edge computing, So the ever-changing dynamics of internet usage, has culminated into rising demands for data center decentralization and has entered micro data centers to foray into mainstream infrastructure management practices. So what has happened is it has resulted in more and more businesses expanding their cloud-based content delivery capabilities to users that are closer to their network's edge. So usually it is those 2-tier to 3-tier cities through micro data centers. So what we are doing is, instead of having one consolidated data center which manages all the entire show, we are having micro data centers near around our end user organizations or end user partners, where we reduce the latency issues, and that is helping us reaching out to the last mile. But obviously, having said so, there are challenges in creating such data centers, right? So let's see how to take that forward. Moving on, trend number 5. I think a very, very critical piece is with the speed to market. So as you're aware, speed to market not just is internet or IT challenge, it is a business. While we might want to put it as a business challenge, we also should see it as a business opportunity. The first to step out of their goose and finish a chase is usually the guy who wins the race, right? So speed to market is critical for your very survival and to be on the top of your game, So speed to market is now seen not only purely from a business or a CXO standpoint, but also seen as a part of a CIO standpoint, is one of the key drivers for companies developing the bulk of their data center capability today. So the data centers need to be adept enough to make sure that their business delivery centers are managed seamlessly by their data centers. So when we are developing a data center or when we are restructuring a data center, speed to market is kept in control, right? And they have to, they have found that traditional silos between engineering and construction phases are cumbersome and unproductive. So as a result, they're embracing a turnkey approach to data center design and deployment that leverages integrated modular designs, off-site constructions, and disciplined project management. Vendors which are bringing together infrastructure expertise, design, and engineering capabilities with sophisticated project management would tend to have a yardstick or advantage to deliver turnkey capabilities which can build better and more efficient data centers in the future faster. Moving on, last but not least, I think this is, while it has been spoken about for a while now, but the way we see is it is one important trend that is shaping the future of data centers, particularly in India. And it is all about going green, because it's not just about a fad anymore. You get carbon footprint points that really helps in the way we function as a data center, right? So data centers are now working towards a lesser energy consumption and hence reducing their energy footprint. Subsequently, data centers are now working towards achieving better efficiency, newer cooling technologies, and improved power usage effectiveness. So data centers as services do not stop here, though. They're scaling their efficiency beyond green by employing other efficiency techniques such as water usage efficiency, economizers, evaporating cooling technologies, and so on and so forth. So that's it from my end. My final takeaway would be, the data center market is growing fast, and that is happening as a result of an increase in digital evolution. The higher the amount of digital content is produced, more the number of data centers required to host and run all these mission-critical informations. So obviously, you've had traditional sectors like BFSI, telecom, insurance, and IT, who have been always in the forefront of technology adoption. But I'm sure going forward, we'll have more industries uptaking it and trying to have that balance between the right without compromising on the speed and agility of a data center, yet with keeping in mind the mission-critical application which need to be deployed and kept in the right consideration. So that's it from my end. Shordeep, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ghosh, for setting up the platform for today's webinar. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the next speaker. We have with us Mr. Anurag Gupta, who is the Country Business Head, Flexible Capacity, HPE, to discuss on private cloud benefits with the economics of public cloud. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Gupta.
Thanks, and thanks, Apulak. I'm going to take you through the session for the next 30 minutes or so, where I'll be talking about, how we can set up a private cloud but within your data center, ensuring that the economics of the public cloud are available, to you within your data center. It's an interesting and new kind of a model. Okay, so as we talk to a lot of customers across, the country and across verticals, we find that there are a few common problems across, whichever initiative or innovation that the customer is trying to go through, whether big data or social or analytics or things like that. Okay. And, some of the main challenges have been around long procurement and implementation cycles. There's a lot of upfront capital expenditure that would come in, and every time they would go to the CFO, he'd probably say, there's no budget available, you'll have to manage within the same thing, but business would come back and say, I want this as of yesterday, or I want it today. So it's kind of constantly a challenge because of, all of these things. Okay. Invariably what happens is because, it takes a long time to procure and implement, CIOs land up trying to consume whatever budget is available and try to get the best possible deal within that, which would also result sometimes in extra capacity being deployed, okay, if at all that was possible. And, it also helps, manage things like peaks and bursts and so on. But at the end of it, it would all result in a larger green or a larger kind of power consumption, cooling, and so on. Okay. Of course, more equipment bought up front means a higher AMC bill. And, the ability to take advantage of newer technology coming about is something that was is constantly a challenge, okay, because newer technology might mean lower power and cooling, but since there's already capacity existing, trying to get approvals is not that easy, and so on, would mean that, one has to live with whatever one has. Now, on the right side of your screen, this is a survey by Frost and Sullivan, where most IT managers and CIOs talked about high maintenance cost, to the extent that 27% of the respondents said that high maintenance cost was the #1 cost in the data center. Keeping up with technology, budget constraints, all the things I was just mentioning as, things that being very important to them, poor application, increasing availability, things like that, okay? So the need of the hour really for a data center is an agile infrastructure which can be implemented very quickly, which can scale very quickly. Ideally, if the payment for that did not involve deploying lots of money up front, almost like an OpEx kind of a model or a services kind of a model, while retaining the choice of infrastructure, the architecture that you needed. Because if the infrastructure choice didn't really matter, then one could also look at a private public cloud. And to top it all, more than a best effort basis SLA, something like a guaranteed SLA, so that, business users and operations could be more comfortable. So, across the board, when we talk to CIOs, CFOs, line of business, or, the operations folks, what we realize is that each one of them has their own viewpoint on anything, especially when it comes to data center infrastructure. Okay, the motivations, the outcomes that each one is trying to achieve is very different. For example, for a CIO, the speed of IT delivery and time to market is very important. CFO may not look at it that way. He may be interested in, or he or she may be interested in looking at that entire investment and wondering, is that the best place that I should put in my money, or is there a better place where I can put in my money? What really matters to the business? How can we grow the business rather than, okay, storage space running out, I need more storage space. Maybe that's not his point of view. When it comes to line of business, of course, like I was mentioning earlier, innovation and having everything right now available is important to them. And finally, when it comes to infrastructure and operations, they'd love to, see nothing change. Probably everything can remain very, very stable, very efficient, and things like that. So across the board, different people or different organizations, different BUs, if you may call them that, within the organization have a different way of looking at things. So procuring infrastructure again and again becomes pretty complicated. Okay? So when you think about the new kind of workloads that are emerging in the data center or, in the organization, the way business is demanding it, the way, the changes are happening, the rapid changes in technology. Okay, so you're really left with two options: either keep it on your premise or keep it in someone else's premise. Someone else's premise could be, even a public cloud or, whatever it be. But, really, it's coming down to a choice, how much of capacity should you have within your data center? What are the benefits of keeping it within your data center? What are the trade-offs of not keeping it within your data center, and so on, okay? And, it's been a difficult choice. About 3 years ago, a lot of people, moved out into the public cloud. And 3 years down, and there's enough data on the internet available to substantiate what I'm just going to say, is that, a lot of people have moved back. Companies like Dropbox, who were purely on the public cloud, have moved to an on-prem model, okay? So there's this constant, dilemma in everyone's head as to, which is the best model. Should I invest in my data center? Should I enhance my data center? Should I just put everything into the public cloud? Is that an option? What are the implications, and so on, okay? And I think this is something that everyone's having to deal with constantly. Everyone's having to strategize around, okay? So what we are saying is that we have a solution to this problem, and we call that HPE flexible capacity. where you don't have to choose. You can have the apples and the oranges, which is the on-prem and the public cloud, all out of the same contract, out of the same piece of, paper, if you may, wherein we're providing a public cloud-like experience in your data center, where you get all the benefits, you choose your architecture, you control who accesses that infrastructure and who doesn't, and all the things that are used to doing in your own data center. And at the same time, we also are tied up with Microsoft Azure, and we give you public cloud space through the same contract. So what it lets you do is, depending on the workload and depending on the time that, that workload is being discussed, you can kind of either keep it on-prem or you can keep it off-prem, okay? And I'll talk about, how that works, okay? So there's really two kinds of constructs, if you may. On the x-axis, I've got the sourcing requirements. On the y-axis, I've got the flexibility in the level of service, okay? And currently, most of you may be in an arrangement which I loosely call CapEx. It's really a financial arrangement. Buying equipment is, a financial arrangement. Leasing it is a financial arrangement. Capacity on demand is a financial arrangement, okay? It's difficult to source, okay? It takes a lot of time, okay? You kind of call in the bids. First, you need to decide what you want, when you want it. You call in the bids. You have to evaluate all the vendors. You have to make your recommendations, get all the budgets approved and all of that. So it takes a certain amount of time to source, okay? And, in terms of level of flexibility that it offers, once you've bought it, you pretty much live with it for the useful life. That is the duration in which you write off the asset. So it's really a financial arrangement, okay? On the other side, you've got a services arrangement. And the most flexible of them is the public cloud. You can pretty much decide, okay, in the next 10 minutes, I need a certain size of VM. I need a certain performance coming out of the storage. Swipe your credit card and you acquire it, okay? No long-term implications. You don't want it after a couple of months, just dump it, and that's it. So extremely easy to source and extremely flexible because, you can always take advantage of the latest available depending on the workload demand. Application vendors will turn around and say, I want a particular type of environment, okay? Mostly it should be available as long as it's generic. It's very, very specific. Of course, public cloud may not be an option. But in general, most of the generic applications, I'd say 80–85% of the applications could kind of work out of VMs or a virtualized environment or so on. And I guess that number will keep going up going forward. So somewhere in between this is what we're calling the hybrid cloud, and flexible capacity comes exactly in that space where we're talking about workloads defining where they want to sit within your data center or in the public cloud. And a combination of them is what flexible capacity offers, okay? Where you can continue to keep things on your premise. You can use them for the duration that you want to use them, and then when you don't need them, you can kind of start scaling them down. And, maybe kind of scale up on the public cloud, or if you don't need things in the public cloud, then scale them down and increase capacity in your data center, okay? So a true hybrid cloud kind of offering, okay? So how we do this is pretty interesting, okay? So we deal with a couple of terms like requested capacity and buffer, okay, on your screen on the right. So requested capacity is, let's say, I'll take a specific example of storage. Let's say you need 10 terabytes of storage. That becomes requested capacity. We will install a little bit of local buffer, maybe 10–15%, so maybe about 11–11.5 terabytes we'll install for you, okay? And depending on, how much you need, we kind of bill you for that. And whatever you don't need, you can turn off, deallocate, and decrease your capacity. You need to not use it on your in your data center. We've also got this Microsoft Azure portion that I spoke about, and we can move that workload into the public cloud. and vice versa. So, HPE is also a partner for the Azure Stack, which is their on-prem piece, and which is expected to launch shortly. But we're one of the world's premier partners on that, with a lot of trained resources available. So we're able to dynamically move loads from your data center to out and back in. So what we're really saying is that you don't need to decide. Whatever SLAs you need can be provided for your on-prem capacity. Okay, it's better than best effort. So traditionally, people talked about a 99 point whatever number of nines, and things like that. But in terms of actual availability, there was no implication apart from a little bit of penalty clauses and things like that. If, let's say, the business outcome wasn't getting achieved, let's say the business wasn't doing as well, there was no outcome for the vendor, okay? Which means that you're pretty much invested and paid the vendor all the money up front. Okay? Here, what we're saying is that it's like a monthly bill that is getting paid. You're not paying any money up front. Okay? Hence, what you're getting is the best of both worlds, on-prem and on-demand IT. Another way of looking at this whole, offering, on the x-axis I've got time, on the y-axis I've got dollars. Okay, and let's assume this green dotted line was the capacity utilization over a period of time. And the flexible capacity model, like I showed you earlier, is a services model. It's not a financial model. Okay, so one of the first services we undertake in this model is monitoring and management of capacity in your data center. Okay, capacity management monitoring is our responsibility. Okay, ensuring that capacity is always available is our responsibility in this model. So that's an SLA, okay, that we would undertake. Now, typically, what you would do if you were to purchase equipment is you'll estimate, or I would say guesstimate, based on inputs received from your application vendor, maybe your own, kind of knowledge, maybe based on a recommendation from the hardware vendors or the equipment providers and so on, or maybe a partner that you kind of you're used to dealing with, and whatever budget is available. So the various constraints that may be put together, and you'll kind of decide, okay, I want to buy a certain amount of capacity, and you'll invest a certain amount of dollars, and that capacity may be good for a period of time, let's say 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever that period be. Okay, how much ever can be fit into that, and that's typically how a typical purchase decision would happen. Okay, and as you start running out of capacity, you would kind of initiate the process to buy more, and you buy a certain amount of capacity more, and move on along the red line. Okay, what we're doing in flexible capacity is, since we are monitoring the capacity utilization, okay, we would start deploying in smaller steps. Okay, so that we're ensuring that you're not putting in too much of capacity up front, thereby saving on your power and cooling in your data center. Okay, and also at the same time ensuring that buffer is always there, buffer and over and above whatever capacity you require. This entire green area then becomes the saving that you can have in this model. Okay, and as and when let's say new projects come, or you suddenly experience, let's say, a seasonality, and you want additional capacity, we can bring capacity ahead of demand and deploy it. Okay, and it kind of becomes a very interesting model if you think from if you're kind of used to having everything in your data center and you're considering a cloud journey, then it becomes an interesting stepping stone to move from your current deployment in your data center and moving towards the cloud, because it requires change of mindset, change of skills, a whole lot of things in terms of facilitating a cloud migration. Okay, and we'll bring all of that. Now, it's kind of not without any strings, I would say. So this green dotted line that you can see on the screen is the minimum commit. Okay, so there's a certain minimum bill that you would pay for, irrespective of whether you'd use it or not. Okay, and this is typically the example I like to give is your electricity bill at home. Okay, so depending on the connected load, there's a minimum amount that you would pay. and for a month, let's say you're out of town, you'd still get a minimum electricity bill. So, it's similar in this model. We have a minimum, amount that comes in. Okay. Now, the other element of this whole thing is that anything that you require in your data center, okay, in terms of infrastructure, the servers, the storage, the networking, software, even some amount of third parties, roughly about 20 to 30% of the contract value can be third party, non-HPE equipment, the Azure operating systems, the virtualization layer, and so on. So the only thing we don't bring in is the, the database licenses and the application licenses, okay? But the rest of it pretty much is there. Now, the other element of your electricity bill is a unit of measure, right? So similarly, for each piece of equipment that we bring into your data center, we have a unit of measure, which is very simple to kind of measure. Like typically for servers, we would think about a per server or a per blade, or it could be per VM, it could be per container, it could be per core, so various flavors on compute. When we think about storage, typically it would be per GB, okay? And, the question I get asked a lot of times is, how do you decide, the per GB rate? So it depends on the start and end capacity. It depends on the tier that we're deploying. So it could be an archival tier like an NL-SAS. It could be a SAS tier. It could be an SSD tier. So each of those tiers would have a different per GB rate. Okay. And this is absolutely customized because, you're choosing your equipment. It's not like the public cloud where there's a standard rate. Here, this is a customized service that we are providing with your SLAs, your type of equipment, your architecture of equipment, hence, a per GB rate. But it works well because, storage size, disk sizes are constantly going up, and, you may require smaller capacity additions. So if you're charging you on a per GB basis, that gives you a lot of flexibility. Okay. Networking typically would go per port and so on. So we've given certain standard, units of measure that we would kind of bill along. Okay. And what it lets you do is decide how much of utilization you want to have for the month. Okay. Typically, we would measure capacity once a day, average it out for the month, and at the end of the month, generate a bill and send it across to you. Okay. So if I see the end-to-end process in this model, okay, we start with defining your requirements and business drivers. Understanding the outcomes that you want to achieve is important because this is a service, it kind of is a customized service. We want to make sure that it's helping you achieve the outcomes that you want. Your outcomes could be you want to focus on innovation, you want your team to focus on maybe, developing new features for the business, new functionality for the business, things like that. And, this whole mundane task of managing the data center, managing the infrastructure in the data center, ensuring it is always available, ensuring, it is kind of working in the manner that it should be working, it's being enhanced in the manner that delivers maximum for your business. So those mundane tasks, if those are your drivers, then those are the things that we can undertake kind of to do as part of this contract. So once you've defined all of this, we sign up a contract. You don't need to pay any money over here, okay? We install the equipment in your data center, we configure it, and we set up a very simple metering mechanism. Requires no ports to be opened in your data center, so no security considerations, okay? And, at the end of the month, like I mentioned, we generate a bill and we send that across to you. You pay your bill. It's like a postpaid mobile bill. And, with all those, units of measure and depending on how much you've consumed across each one of them. So that's the process that we would follow. Okay? Now, how does this compare with your current model of procurement in your data center? Typically, when you think about procuring, you think about hardware, software, and support, which again I'll call the bill of material or the BOM. Okay, everyone refers to it as the BOM. Okay, but really, what you're trying to do is achieve certain outcomes. So there's no connection between what you bought and the outcome that you're trying to achieve. Okay, a lot of times you've got it all figured out, but a lot of times, there may be new constraints, new problems that keep, coming up, which you need to deal with or which become pressures for you. Okay. So what we try to do is, as we are setting up this statement of work for the service, we kind of try to, make sure that everything that is required to deliver the outcome, whether, cash flow is an outcome, time to market is an outcome, reducing operational cost may be an outcome, so whatever is required in terms of, the governance, the planning, the metering, the tailoring of services and all of that is ensured, okay? So hence, we are able to make sure that, this kind of works better for a longer term, okay? Now, typically I'm asked a lot of times is, how does this compare, if I was to buy it on CapEx, then, how does this compare? So, I've taken an example over here, the gray blocks in the left of your screen, the bar chart. The gray one is CapEx, the purchase option, and the green one is the flexible capacity option. So typically, when you buy, you invest a certain amount of money up front, and then every year there may be small increments in capacity which you'll kind of keep investing in as and when required. Okay. Whereas in the flexible capacity model, since it's a service, okay, there's no upfront money to be paid, okay, and it's kind of a monthly bill that is being generated depending on the capacity you're utilizing, and assuming that your capacity needs are constantly growing as your business is growing. Hence, this small green bar keeps increasing in size over each year. So when I plot this on a graph on your on the right side of your screen, you have the gray, the purchase option on top, and you have the flexible capacity, the green line below. And as you can see, there's a huge difference between the two. Okay. Now, every CFO or finance controller would look at it or evaluate this investment mostly on 4 parameters. That is the cash flow, the net present value, the ROI, the payback period, and the internal rate of return. And if I were to apply these 5 parameters to the purchase option and to the flexible capacity option, then obviously because in the purchase option, the CapEx option, there's a huge outflow of money up front, flexible capacity looks much, much better on all 5 investment parameters, and that is something we are able to prove as part of an engagement on flexible capacity. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is risk. There are 2 kinds of risk. Typically, we would think of financial risk and technology risks. Okay, so I've taken a project life cycle, the design, implement, run, and manage on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, I've taken a certain sum of money. So assuming that we want to go through a project, we kind of typically look at buying the infrastructure up front, which is the red block. Okay, and in this example, 2 crores is the money that is spent up front. If I were to kind of go with a project. Okay, now what happens is till we're reaching the run stage, that is, we're going through testing, Q&A, and all of those kind of things, we would not require all the infrastructure. Okay. Now, when we're reaching the run stage, typically 3 things could happen. One is the project duration could get extended, and it invariably happens so because business is giving new requirements, there are a whole lot of new things that are coming up, and because of that, a run phase could get extended. Sometimes you go into an agile kind of a deployment where, you start launching services as and when they're ready and, keep enhancing them, or you probably go for a waterfall approach. But whichever approach you take, at the end of it, it could mean an extended run phase, which means that you didn't need the investment the day you made it. You could have probably delayed it a little bit, but you only found this out, when you reach the run stage. The second thing that could happen is that the whole project could get scrapped. Maybe it's not meeting the, parameters that, is kind of required. Or it could be that, the project is kind of going perfectly as it was planned, and we start ramping up from there, and you see the green line going up on your screen. Okay, so if I did not invest all that cash up front, then that entire area, okay, between the green line and the red line becomes the cash preserved. It becomes the risk shared by HP because, obviously if you didn't spend the money, then, that's the risk shared because like I mentioned, if the project gets extended, we don't get another hardware order or a services order in flexible capacity to enhance the capacity. And of course, if the project is getting scrapped, then you'll say, okay, I'm sorry, but I don't need that infrastructure anymore. And, that's pretty much it for that project. So, risk from a financial perspective is very well covered on the flexible capacity option. The second one is in terms of technology risk. Okay? Typically, I've given an example of, this year your application vendor said, I'm perfectly okay with SAS because his application may not be tuned to take advantage of SSD technology, okay, today. Maybe in 6 or 8 months or maybe a year and a half, or whatever time frame, he'll come back and say, oh, I don't need SAS anymore. I'm fine with SSD. I think, you'll get much better performance. You'll be able to do all these kind of things if you had SSD. Well, what do? You already bought that SAS and you bought a lot of it in the beginning itself of the project. Okay, so what do you do with all of that? So, some of that investment, you just try to make the best use of it. Okay, in the flexible capacity model, as your capacity requirement keeps increasing, we deploy in much smaller steps. Okay, hence, if there's a later and better and cheaper technology available, okay, you can always take advantage of it. Let's take an example on SSD itself. Last year, when I was talking to customers on the flexible capacity model, we were talking about 1.92 terabyte disks, and that gave a certain price per GB. This year, we are talking about 3.84 and 7.68 terabyte disks, and I'm pretty sure next year we'll be talking about 15 terabyte disks. Now, obviously, the per GB on each of them is different. The 15 terabyte would be cheaper than 1.92 on a per GB basis. So why lock in, why force yourself to invest upfront just because you've got a budget and things like that? What this lets you do is kind of manage your technology risk, always have the latest available with you and so on, okay, while maintaining all those architecture choices that you made, okay? So that's the thing about risk, okay? The next thing I want to talk about is the technology refresh. Now, every piece of technology needs to be refreshed. If you had bought and purchased, even after the asset is written off, sometimes you kind of just keep using it, paying an AMC. May not be the most efficient in terms of power and cooling when you think from your data center perspective, may not be the most efficient in terms of space, but you continue using it, maybe sometimes 6, 7, whatever, 8 years, whatever time you can kind of extract some workload out of it. Okay. What we're doing in the flexible capacity option is, let's say we've signed a 4-year contract because you're used to refreshing technology every 4 years or 5 years or 6 years. At that end of that period, okay, what we would do is just take away the old technology, do a green disposal, give you the green certificate for that, and replace it with the latest and best available at that point in time at no additional cost. Okay, so servers, in this example, I've taken a 4-year life cycle. So in the gray cylinder on the top of your screen, okay, we've deployed a certain amount of capacity that we required in the first year. The yellow cylinder is the capacity we required in the second year. The pink cylinder is what we required in the third year, and the brown cylinder is what we required in the fourth year. I would replace the gray cylinder with the light green cylinder in the fifth year. Okay, capacity is constantly going up. Okay, and this would kind of keep rolling till such time that you want it to roll. Okay, you may say, okay, I don't require it in 4 years, maybe I require it in 5 years, which is absolutely fine. Okay, we could roll it every 5 years. Okay, and so on. So this is the model for servers. Okay, on storage, it gets a little more interesting, which is the bottom of your screen. So where you see the number 1 written on the left of the bottom. Okay, there's a controller box that came in. Storage typically has 3 pieces to it or 3 elements to it. There's a controller box, their drive cages, and their drives, right? So typically, the storage box is what we require in the beginning, okay? And let's say we have the same 4-year life of that box, okay? We kind of add drive cages as and when required, and we'd add disks, okay, as and when required also, depending on, whether you require it, don't require it, and so on. Okay, so we keep enhancing that. And we keep adding them through the life cycle of this contract. Now, in the 35th month, okay, okay, which is just the beginning of the 4th year, we would come back and ask you, do you want a tech refresh? You have the option of saying no. You can also say yes. So if you say yes, in the 37th month, I'll bring in a new controller box and install it in your data center, and all the 4th year growth in disks will happen on the new box, okay? So what it lets you do is migrate all the old capacity into the new box over a 1-year period. Now, if you think about it, the way it's happening today, the day you're retiring your storage box, it's like goes like a big bang, okay? You have to suddenly migrate your entire data, and it's like a nightmare. You know, what if I lost some data, okay? So this is a very, very smooth migration. Both boxes are coexisting for an entire 12-month period. And, you know, we can keep repeating this cycle as many times as required, okay? So if you see, the migration risk is taken away. That's another example of technology risk, okay, the migration part. And, you know, there's a very smooth hand-holding which happens, you know, through this whole tech refresh cycle, okay? So that's tech refresh, okay? The last thing is, since this is the services model, I spoke about capacity metering, capacity management, buffer management, and all of that coming in as part of this contract. There are a few other services that come bundled along with this, and they lead to a certain amount of cycles per year, okay? In terms of the number of times that needs to be performed, how much time will it take each time it's performed, and so on. So every time there's a capacity to be enhanced, you know, we kind of facilitate that entire discussion. We create those change requests and so on, ensuring a kind of an SLA-based service, something that's better than best effort, would mean that we have preventive maintenance in there. So it's not just about reactive support. When an incident happened, how fast can we recover? It's about preventing those reactive situations from happening. So as part of that, firmware and patch management, installation, deinstallation, or all of that would be included as part of this, you know, service. And of course, we will need relationships from a project management perspective, from a planning and review perspective, and finally from a change management perspective. Every time we are kind of making changes on the infrastructure, you know, all of this would require some amount of time and effort and skills and so on. So all of them add up to a certain amount of man days per year, okay? Which, you know, even for a moment, if I kept across aside the cost of per day, which is more of international rates, but, you know, that leads to a certain amount of saving, because the flexible capacity offering comes with all of these services at no additional cost to you, okay? So to kind of conclude, you know, we're saying it's unique and different because, you know, unlike a public cloud, it's sitting in your data center, in your premises, okay? It is single tenant, which means that the infrastructure is not shared by anybody else. So unlike a hosted facility, this is dedicated infrastructure to you. Nobody else can touch it. You decide who comes in, you decide the technology, and so on. So it's very different from the public cloud. Of course, if you want the public cloud, then through Azure, we can also provide that capacity. It's unlike a product lease because you don't have to over-provision. You don't have to buy excess capacity here. It's not like an EMI, fixed EMI payment that's coming in every month. You know, depending on, you know, how much capacity you need for that day, you use for that day, we meter it for that day. And at the end of the month, depending on how much you've used, the bill can go up, it can go down, and you can control it the way and manner in which you require it. It's different from any other utility offering available in the market because we're talking about covering your entire data center. And like I mentioned, about 20 to 30% of the contract value need not be HPE. So an application vendor comes back and says, oh, I want a particular brand of server. That's okay. You want a particular brand of storage. That's also okay, and so on. Okay. So you're not tied into your one vendor. So summarizing this from an operational perspective, there are a whole lot of services that are included. The fourth point on this slide, the enhanced call management, which means, kind of starting with level 2 support, starting with a person who already understands your environment, who knows your application versions, your software versions, and so on. All of that is included along with this because, if I can't bill you for a certain period, that's also revenue loss for me, okay? So we've got more skin in the game, if I may to use those words, in this model than otherwise. I spoke about the financial benefits and the shared risk that we have in this model, okay? So unlike, when you're buying equipment and CapEx under a purchasing model, where, irrespective of what happens on your outcomes, the vendor doesn't really care. In the flexible capacity model, we care because it affects our billing, okay? So a lot of financial benefits that also come in along with this model, okay? And finally, what we are saying is that, there's no upfront bill to be paid. You pay for what you use. It helps you optimize your cash flows. It helps you eliminate the cost of over-provisioning. The capacity is still in your data center, okay? But since you're not using it, you don't pay for it, okay? And of course, it kind of significantly increases your time to market. You can avoid long procurement cycles with this because it's a services arrangement. Every time you want more capacity, you just sign a change request and you'll come and install more capacity. Would mean a bigger bill next month, but that's an option. If business is doing well and everything is going great, then why not? How does it matter? In terms of the complexity, you're saying one contract, one usage portal for capacity that's in your data center or out of it. So having heard all of this, and if you think this is interesting, what do we do next? Okay. So the way we take this forward is if this is interesting to you, we can schedule a transformation workshop, okay, where you can sit down and discuss the scope. We can talk about, the outcomes that you'd like to achieve. We'd like to identify the people, the processes, and the improvements that you'd like to achieve. And when we put it all together in a financial offering that works for your finance organization, it works for you as a CIO in terms of, all the benefits and all your goals that you'd like to achieve. Okay, that's something that we kind of achieve in this workshop. HPE has a lot of award-winning products, okay, across servers and compute and the storage, the big data and so on, okay. And at the bottom, you'll see flexible capacity is also an award-winning service. We've been doing this for about 8-9 years across the world. We've been offering this in India for the last 2.5 years now. Got a lot of customers already on this model within the country. There are a lot of new, things that are emerging, the IoTs and the big data and so on. So along your digital journey, I think we'd be a very interesting partner to look at and to evaluate in terms of the services offering that we are bringing to you. Okay. Finally, I'd like to leave you with this, that there are a lot of customer videos available on YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and type HPE Flexible Capacity, you'll see customers talking to you and telling you in about 3-4 minutes why they chose this offering, okay, and I'd urge you to kind of go and have a look at that. So with that, I'd hand the session back to the host, okay. Thank you so much for your time, and we can move to the questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta, for sharing those thoughtful insights. Now, I would request all the attendees, should you wish to ask any question, please press 01 on your telephone keypad. You may also use the chat facility to send your questions to all panelists. I repeat, ladies and gentlemen, should you wish to ask any question, please press 01 on your telephone keypad. You may alternately use the chat facility to send your questions to all panelists. Thank you. In the meantime, I would like to hand over the proceedings to Mr. Ghosh for any questions which just came offline.
Sure, thank you so much. Anurag, thanks a lot for the session. I think you couldn't have covered it more beautifully. I think it's encapsulated all the finer details really nicely. Till we get any questions from our audience, I had one quick one for you. This is a question probably which you might be able to answer because you have so many years of experience managing things around DC. There could be instances when while during the designing and the building phase of a data center, CIOs or the organization gets it wrong, right? For some reason, there are mistakes which happen during the design and build phase of a data center. In today's context, how can one really extend the life of that existing data center? What is the best way forward?
Yeah, so good question. What I would say is that hybrid is the way to grow. Okay. While you have your own data center, there are a lot of other options that are available. They're hosted data centers, okay, which I can also think of on-prem itself. Okay. They're caged hosted data centers. There's public cloud space. I would say let the workload decide where it needs to sit. Okay.
Right.
And, have the flexibility, have the right partner in place. It's important to have the right partner, someone like HPE, who knows you, who knows your data center, who understands hybrid IT very well. Okay, moving things from on-prem to public cloud and back is not an easy proposition. It requires skills, it requires infrastructure, it requires a whole lot of things. And, having the right partner and having the right strategy is very important. Okay. So even if you've got certain things wrong in kind of initial phases of building a data center, or we're running out of capacity very quickly because the organization is growing very well, I think one can easily kind of fix it, correct it to the extent possible, extend it as and when required. I would say hybrid need not be just public cloud and on-premise. It could also be hosted.
Okay. Thanks. Anurag, if you can see, we have one question from Deepak Malik, where he's asking, is there any minimum capacity on quantity of servers that need to be deployed? There's a question from him, I guess, to you.
Yeah, very good question, Deepak. So, typically we would start with one chassis in terms of compute, which is about 16 blades. Okay? With storage, we typically start with about 40 terabytes. So it's a pretty low kind of deployment to begin with. And once we've started off, then, any amount of ramp up is fine. The thing I would mention when we think about small and big is to get the architecture correct. Right. If you were thinking about, let's say, a 3 or 5 year capacity and where your business is going to be in that time, make sure that the basic architecture is kind of right in terms of the way it can scale. You may or may not get there, and that's the beauty of the flexible capacity model. Even if you're starting small, you can give a forecast, but you don't have to commit to grow. Okay,
Right.
We'll commit those rates to you in terms of the unit rates and things like that, and we'll hold it for that period of time. But you don't have to kind of invest upfront a lot of capacity, and at the same time make sure that your architecture is right.
Right.
So we have an audio question here as well from Mr. Firoz from Dixit Infotech. Your line is unmuted. You may please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. So my question over here is, first question is, like, we have a committed contract time, like exit clause. The customer cannot exit before certain period, say 24 months or 36 months, whatever it is. Second is how big infrastructure or requirement is the right set of customer for this flexible capacity. Maybe the number of servers, so the minimum requirement is 15, 20, and storage minimum requirement. The last question is, one of my customer I met, the query he raised out is his CFO is not willing to go with the model of OpEx because they see benefit in going in CapEx model by having the depreciate value and etc. That point I was not able to counter that.
Okay. So, thanks, Feroz, for your question. So, in terms of, I'll start with the last one first. So, OpEx and CapEx are more of accounting treatments, and I think the finance and the auditors are the best people to kind of deal with that. What we are providing is a service. How they choose to account for it is really up to them. Okay. To my limited understanding of the topic, there are certain rules under which, specific heads are treated as OpEx or not treated as OpEx. There are really 4 rules, and if one makes them fail, then it doesn't become an OpEx. It becomes, it comes onto the balance sheet. Okay. So I would say, we are providing a service. How they count for it is really their choice. Okay. So they can kind of pretty much decide that. In terms of contract duration, okay, so if you think about buying equipment in CapEx, there is no exit, right? You pretty much live with it for at least the time that you have it in your books, maybe sometimes longer, right? So what we're saying in the flexible capacity model, we could look at contract durations typically 3 to 7 years are the popular ones. 3 to 7 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, going up to 7 years. But it could easily be double, right? Because if you're doing a tech refresh, the duration could be double. Okay, so you know, and at some point in time, the brand and all of that stops mattering. It's really about you know, the SLA and the capacity. If I'm giving you a good service, you know, then how does it really matter? Okay? And in terms of scaling, again, you know, while, you know, people can start small and things like that, like I mentioned earlier, architecture is very important. Get the architecture right, and then, you know, any customers or any segment is fine in terms of qualifying which ones to go after and, you know, kind of look at. I would say everybody is fine.
So, I'm sorry, the third question was, this question was like, what if the customer's requirement is just say 10 servers and say 15, 20 TB of storage?
Yeah, I mentioned the minimum. I mentioned the minimum that we typically go with. If it's both, you know, maybe we can look at it. We're talking about 10 servers, 20 terabytes of storage combined. I talked about 60 terabytes or 40 terabytes of storage. If it's a little smaller for both, then one can look at it. You know, maybe the advantages of going with a service model may or may not apply. It depends on the outcomes that one is looking for. You know, so this is really about trying to align with the organization's journey and the outcomes of the key stakeholders. You know, how do we achieve that? It's not about, you know, just a purchasing model. I mean, there's a lot of options there, leases and CapEx and, you know, all of that. So it's not a financial.
Okay. And I'm sorry, and the first question I intend to ask was, like, what is the minimum commitment from customer? Let's say he wants to exit this contract within 24 months or something like that, for whatever reason. From a customer point of view, so what is the minimum commitment he has to give in a period of months?
See, there's a termination formula that's available. Okay.
Okay.
Frankly, I wouldn't understand why somebody would want to exit. If he had bought in CapEx, like I mentioned, there is no exit, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Question that you might want to take up, because if somebody who's asked is, you know, like for instance, are hybrid environment suitable for the SMB segment or small applications? So I guess, would you like to take that up as one of your last questions before we sign
sure.
off?
I mean, yeah, so, you know, there are a lot of our partners who are looking at setting up not a kind of an off-premise data center, okay? So it kind of still applies, hybrid still applies to the SMB segment, you know. SMB sometimes is forced to go with standardized options that are available in public clouds, right? But what our partners are doing is offering a kind of like a hosted data center close to the SMB, okay? And they're able to give them a lot of choices and options, okay? Hence, I would say hybrid in a different kind of way, okay? May not be entirely sitting out of a data center in an SMB, okay? But it also could be something that is hosted out of one of our partner organizations where they're kind of bringing a few more SMBs together and pooling resources and trying to make sure that the economics is right, the price is right, the service is right, the service is customized for the SMB segment. So one kind of can imagine the benefits that SMBs can get from this model too, yes. So SMB definitely.
Right. Perfect. Shordeep, do we have any more calls in waiting?
No, we do not have any more questions in the queue.
Okay. So I guess, Anurag, that's it from our end. Once again, thank you so much for setting up the great discussion today by your amazing presentation. For the rest of the people who had queued in, thank you so much for joining in. I'm sure there'll be a few questions that you would want, Anurag and his team at HPE to answer. Please drop a note either to us at Cyber Media Research. We'll be more than happy to accommodate your request and share it with HPE. Or else, if you want, you can directly get in touch with Anurag Gupta. His email ID coordinates are there in front of you, anurag.gupta@hpe.com. Right? That's it from my end. Signing off. Anurag, any last words before we call it a day?
Yes, you don't have to choose anymore between on-prem and off-prem. You can have it all with flexible capacity. Thank you.
Perfect. Over to you, Shoradeep.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the panel members, and I would request all the participants to kindly submit your feedback form at the end of the webinar. It will definitely be useful to us. So on behalf of HPE and CMR, I would like to thank all the participants who joined us today. We hope that has been a useful time spent with us. Thank you, everyone. Wish you all a good day ahead.